Welcome to the Bobcat in Soft Pastel. As you can see here, I've drawn off my Bobcat onto some beige velour paper, and I did that with my 9B pencil, and now I'm using my 6B charcoal pencil to add some dark hairs in. Carefully draw those in so they'll show through under the layers of pastel that we're going to apply in a little bit. So we want them to show through. You can get your very own reference of this Bobcat at pixabay.com for free. So I encourage you to do that so that you can follow along with me and see why I chose the colors that I did and why I'm doing what I do. I also encourage you to watch the introductory pastel videos that are free on my website at kwit.com, and they will explain to you about the transfer method and some of the other things we do when we paint in pastel. So I encourage you to look at those before you get started. So I'm just carefully adding black pastel, and you can see where I've also added some white charcoal pencil in places around the eyes. We're going to put more of that in. We want to put the white hairs in so that they show up also underneath the layers of pastel that are to come. So I'm carefully putting in the dark areas in the cat's ear. Please take your time when you're doing this. It's going to be worth it in your finished painting. It's going to make all the difference. So now I'm going to add the stripes there around his eyes. I'm using a 6B charcoal pencil to add the dark hairs. I always use a 6B, and I use General brand. All the things I'm using are on your color chart that came with your project. And then I'm going to draw carefully around the eyes. The 6B charcoal, as well as the white charcoal pencil, cannot easily be removed. So be very careful about where you want to place things and where you want to draw your lines. That's why drawing it first with pencil is important. The pencil we can cover up. The charcoal, not so much. So you want to make sure you have everything where you want it before you use the charcoal pencil on your painting. I'm going to speed this up a little bit while I add these dark lines around the cat's eye. Now there's some debate as to whether this is a bobcat or a Canadian lynx. So it can be either one. The bobcat has shorter tufts on its ears. It just depends. I have several reference photos. So I decided to call it a bobcat, but you can call it a lynx if you want to. So I'm adding these little dark areas around the face that are going to help us define the form. And we'll be darkening them up again as we go further on in our painting. I've gone back to normal time now, and I've also zoomed out a little bit so that you can see me draw the lines underneath the chin of the bobcat. You can also see the tufts a little clearer on the tops of the ear. I take my time when I do this. I want you to take yours too. I want to get in those little places where the whiskers come out. Very important, and sometimes they're hard to identify after we get the color on. So this way we'll be able to find them again. I'm forming the mouth, carefully drawing that in. Always looking at my reference photo as I go along. It's very important to do that. The more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. I generally start all my paintings in the same way. I do my drawing on the paper, and then I go over it with charcoal pencil before I start painting and adding pastel colors. Again, I'm going to speed this up just a little bit. You can watch me finish the mouth, add the whisker holes. Before I go on to the eye, I want to outline the nose. If you have a cat at home, the nose and eyes are very similar. So you can use your cat for reference. Now I'm going to outline the right eye. I generally work from the left side of the painting to the right side because I'm right-handed and I don't want to drag my hand through the pastel. So if at all possible, I work from left to right and top to bottom. If you're left-handed, you would do it just the opposite. So I'm carefully drawing this eye, making sure the shape is correct. When your drawing is right, your painting has a better chance of succeeding. If your drawing is wrong from the beginning, it's not going to work out as well. It's very hard to correct a bad drawing when you're in the middle of a painting. So take your time to make sure your drawing is correct. So I'm carefully adding the little black hairs under the eye. I'm thinking about it before I add them, making sure I've got them in the right place that I want. And just drawing short little strokes. Enjoy the process while you paint. Don't try to hurry through it. Once again, I've speeded things up just a little bit, and I've also zoomed out so you could watch me add the dark strokes to the side of the cat's face all the way down underneath his chin. Now after I've finished adding the dark strokes of fur, I'm using my white charcoal pencil to add a few light hairs, particularly the edges of the cat. They will show through in the background, so I'll know exactly where the edge of the face and the back is so that I don't come over too far with my background. I also want to add some light hairs in different places on the cat where they'll show through, like in the ears, and right here I'm adding them around the edge of the face. That way I'll be able to tell where the cat's face begins and ends. They'll show through the layers we're going to put on. This is important. White charcoal pencil is a very good tool. It will not come off. You can't erase it. So be careful where you add it, and don't add too much. I just add a few hairs. We'll use it more in the finishing steps of our Bobcat. I'll speed this up a little bit so we can finish adding these white hairs and begin to add our undercoats. Now we're back in real time, and I'm adding the first layer of pastel, which is 704.7 Rembrandt light gray. We need a base coat layer for this painting, and so I'm going to use gray because certain areas of the cat are white. So I want to put a gray undercoat on the white areas, and we're going to put down some brown in the next step for some of the other areas of the cat. So I'm cross-hatching it back and forth, avoiding the eyes and also the nose area of the cat, which is going to be browner in color. So I'm just not going to put any gray there. But I'm putting the light gray everywhere else on the cat. If you're doing this project and you don't have beige velour, you can certainly use light gray. It works just as well. Do not use any of the darker colors of velour. They do not give a very good result. So if I want to work around the eyes, I use the round end, which I have sanded, to get into smaller places. Now I have broken off a piece of new pastel 283 Van Dyke brown. I have sanded it, and I'm using the flat edge to cross-hatch brown color onto the Bobcat. I'm using a new pastel because I could not find a Rembrandt color that worked well. I don't want it to be too red. I want it to be brown, just kind of a neutral medium brown. So I found the Van Dyke brown works really well. So I just snapped about a third of a piece of the new pastel stick, sanded it, and I'm using it back and forth on the cat to add the brown color that's going to be our base before we add other colors. So we want to start when we paint using the middle value of whatever we're painting, and then we're going to build in the darks, and then we're going to add the lights. So the cat, as you can see from your reference photo, is very brown across the nose, and it also has a lot of white. So we're going to leave the white areas untouched by the brown. I'm going to put brown now across his back. Now I'm using a little bit of 223 burnt umber to just slightly darken and brighten the areas on the sides of the nose, above, across the bridge, above the eyes, and I'm also going to use it on the ears. That again is 223 burnt umber. Up until now I haven't used it much, but I really like the color. We're going to use it throughout the picture. Again, it is not really red. It is more of a neutral plain brown, which is what I was looking for. Here I'm putting it around the whisker holes as well, because there is a little brown hair there. It's always a good idea to stop and check your reference from time to time before adding more color. Here I've decided to use a little bit of 253 Cocoa Brown around the cat. You can see it's the same color. Sometimes it's a little bit lighter than the Burnt Umber, the 223. So you can try that too if you want. I often experiment with different colors before deciding on one or the other. I think the 253 really is going to be a little better, but I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit for now. Here I'm using a 259 New Pastel Dark Gray, where I'm starting to add some shadows in the mouth area of our Bobcat. This area is white, so dark gray is going to act as our shadow color here. Now I'm going to use the sanded side of a 704.3 Rembrandt dark gray to add the dark gray areas underneath the neck as well. I use the Rembrandt for larger areas and the New Pastel for smaller areas. This is also a dark gray. I'm using the round end of it to add darker color in this area. The other piece I was using was a little tiny piece I had left over. This is the other half of that stick, which has a nice round end. So I'm using it to darken the bridge of the nose and add shadow areas to the cat. So we're working darker and darker so that we can add the light hairs on top of that. So I'm continuing to use that dark gray, going down underneath the cat's chin and on all the areas that are white as well. I've decided to add a few white hairs with the white charcoal pencil. That will help guide me with future areas because they're going to show up underneath the layers like we've discussed before. So I'm back to using the dark gray Rembrandt. I'm continuing to add this on the right side of the face. I'm using very light pressure and I'm not applying a lot of heavy pigment. Your light hairs are not going to show up if you put down a lot of heavy pigment initially. So now I'm using it to darken the area of the ear underneath where the lighter color hairs are going to go. I'm going to do that on both ears. Very light pressure. I can't stress that enough. I'm not pushing hard. I'm not depositing a lot of color. Since we already have a layer or two down on the paper, this is the third layer. The pastel is starting to come off very nice and make a very velvety look, which is what we want. That's what makes this work so different from other ways pastel is applied, and will also make your animal look soft and furry. So don't hurry through this and don't push too hard. I'm using the 283 Van Dyke Brown again to add some more brown to the back of the Bobcat. You can see I'm just kind of pushing it around on the paper. I'm going a little bit darker now with my browns, and for that I'm using 353 New Pastel Cordovan. Cordovan's a wonderful Mars violet kind of brown, so it's got a gray tone to it. It's dark. I use it in most every picture that I paint, and I'm just gently stroking that end. You can see I have a very short stick now. They last a long time. Our cat is really developing a three-dimensional quality now. I'm going to speed this up a little bit while I finish adding the 353 cordovan to the surface of the cat's fur. So I'm going to go around his nose and down the sides of his face. We can also mix some 223 burnt umber in here if we think it needs to be a little darker. We'll use that more in the finishing stages of the cat to help blend the colors together, because we're going to need a medium color, mid-value color of brown to make the fur much more realistic. Now a few areas are going to need to be darkened, and we're going to use the 259 gray to do that, because these areas are on the white areas of the cat. So if we're going to darken something there, we want to use the gray. But we can also use the gray in other areas to darken down the brown. It's a very, very useful color. I'm using this dark gray in all the areas of the cat that will be white later on. Under his chin, on his muzzle, the hair is white after it's wiped down around under his nose, so I'm using that gray. I need a darker brown to use on the cat's back, so I'm using a small sanded piece of 538.5 Rembrandt Mars Violet, which happens to be the same color as our 353 Cordovan. It's a little bit darker maybe, but it's pretty much the same color. But I can cover a larger area with a Rembrandt, and I can make it smoother. So these two colors kind of work together. The 353 in the smaller places and the 538.5 in the larger places. I like this color a lot, and I like to use it. Now I'm going back to my gray, 259 gray, continuing to darken some of the values in the cat's face. Now we're going to outline our eyes of our Bobcat with 305 Spruce Blue. I always like to use this dark navy blue. It's a new pastel. Anytime I use black, I use it underneath the black to make the black a little more vivid. It adds depth to the color. So I'm carefully outlining the eye with the spruce blue. I'm also filling in the pupil. After we finish the left eye, I'm moving on to the right eye and outlining it. You can also see that I put a little shadow of the spruce blue underneath the bottom eyelid. I'm filling in the pupil, and after I do that, I'm using the blue just a shade under the eyelid a little bit, and I'm going to do that with the left eye as well. At the same time, I'm going to go ahead and work on the nose. So I'm outlining the nose and I'm coloring the nostrils in with the spruce blue. I'm going to also use the blue to outline the curve of the mouth. Use the blue for that, and also add a little shading. Continuing on with the blue, I'm using it to darken a few of the dark areas that are going to be black on our cat. I'm going to speed this up a little bit for you while I add the dark blue. I've also zoomed out so you could see me add it underneath his chin. So what I'm doing is really just further darkening specific areas on the cat. We have to go really dark before we can add the light, or the light won't show up. But again, I'm using light pressure and I'm not adding a lot of pastel. Going to add blue into the ears in the darker areas that are going to be black, which is the ear hole. I've changed the angle of the camera a little bit and zoomed in on this area so you can see it a little better. I've also speeded it up. So I'm just using blue, going darker and darker. You can see that the white charcoal pencil I added earlier shows through. It shows where those little hairs are going to be later, which helps me a lot in placement. This is 704.3 dark gray, so I'm darkening the ear a little more. And I'm putting in some 353 new pastel cordovan as well. I'm adding more 353, or you could use 223 burnt umber to darken the areas on the cat. Would be your choice. They're about the same shade of brown, so whichever one you want to use. To continue adding darks, again, very lightly. I'm adjusting things as I go. I don't want to add all my dark at once. I've switched to 229 new pastel black. And now I'm going to outline the eyes and go over some of the areas that we used the blue under. Now I can add the black over top. And since the new pastel is a hard pastel, this would be the better choice. And as you can see, I put a nice fine point on it. It is darker than the charcoal pencil, so I don't want to use a charcoal pencil here. And I don't want to use a pastel pencil because a pastel pencil isn't going to be dark enough. So new pastel is one of the blackest things you can use. I'm going over all the little black spots that we put down. I'm making them blacker. Also adding a little shadow under the upper lid of the eye. Here I'm adding in some black hair, defining the eye area. Do that on the right and the left. One of the lovely things about velour paper, too, in case I haven't mentioned it, is that it doesn't smear. Other pastel papers will smear, and the pastel does not smear on velour paper. You'll see me occasionally rub it with my fingers, but I think I just do it because I like the feel of it. It doesn't really do anything. I am trying to push the pastel into the paper. So now I'm outlining the mouth with black. The harder pastels will push softer pastels into the nap of the velour paper. And sometimes I'll use that technique, but I don't think I'm doing it in this project. But keep that in mind. I'm darkening the little whisker holes on the muzzle of the cat, getting those nice and black. And now I've picked up my 259 gray, and I'm going to darken this area around the nose and where the shadow is on the muzzle, around the nose and right where the mouth is. That's going to be the darkest area on the muzzle, and underneath on the chin and the mouth. I finished up with the gray, and I'm going back to the black to darken those little spots on the side of the face, just a tad. Now I'm darkening the hair on the side of the face. Now I've flipped my new pastel over, and I'm using the sharp flat edge to add hairs. This is my preferred way to do that. You can add lots of nice fine little hairs with the black new pastel. It's a very useful tool. Now I'm using it on the flat side to put in some dark color, but I'm not adding individual hairs. I'm just using the black to darken an area without adding the hairs. Here again, I'm using the blunt side. Then I can switch to a sharp side, add some hairs, or go back to using the blunt end to just add some dark color. I sped this up while I add some black hairs with my black new pastel, using the edge to add hairs, and then using the dull side to add just dark color as needed. I'm also going to use the black to darken up the ears and add any other black accents under the chin or around the face of the cat that need to be added. I'm back in real time now, and I'm using my 353 new pastel cordovan to add brown. I'm going to continue around this cat to use either the 353 for little tiny areas or the 538.5 for larger areas to add brown where I see that it needs brown, or use dark gray if I see that it needs dark gray, because I want to have everything in place to add my light colors. I know this has been a long lesson, but this is well worth taking the time to add these colors. Now when we come back, we're going to add the eyes and the nose. So join me for part 2 coming up next.